Welcome back to the post-production videos. We're going to go over another standard shoot where there's not really any trickery or anything, just a standard conversion. And I've picked out a shoot where I know many of you will be doing something very similar in regards to the way that the colours are and all those kind of things. And as you can see as I scroll along the bottom here, these are the out-of-camera files. Now, I've selected some photos to work on, but basically the exposure and everything is all the same. So I'm going to press on the flagged and see which ones I've picked out. So what I thought is that with a conversion like this, what we're going to do is, I'll show you how to do it simply so that you can convert yourself rather quickly. Once you've done one, you can drag it onto the other. So let's start with this one. So I'm going to do a standard Lightroom fixer-upper, where I'm going to drag the highlights down, the whites down a little bit. I just want to bring some of that detail back. And I will actually do a vignette, but I'm going to do it with a radial. And I am going to click invert on that. And just raise the exposure on them a little bit. That's just a quick way of doing it rather than a brush. Okay, and I'll do a highlight priority. Okay. So I might just actually warm up the whole scene. So I'm going to grab temperature and tint and warm that up just a touch. Okay, so now I'll open that in Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and what we're going to do is make a couple of layers that we can group together on this image that we can just carry across onto all the other images for faster editing. Now when you're working like this, you've got to keep in mind that you need for it to work on the other photographs. So this only works if it's kind of the same scene, the same feel, obviously. Alright, so first of all, what I would like to do is a colour fill. So I'm going to grab the masks and I'm going to make a dark green colour, and I'm just going to pull that down to soft light. Okay. And I'll make that about 53%. Okay, so now I'm going to do a gradient fill, and this time I want to add a little bit of a vignette. So I'm going to again go to dark green, and I'll make the edges a dark green as well. Okay, and I'm going to make it radial, and I'm going to click inverse to make it a vignette, but I do want to make that a little bit hazy, so I'm going to put that on 219. I'd like to do another colour fill, and this time I'm after a khaki, kind of in the greys. There we go. And I'm going to pop that onto soft light and put that at about 8%. Okay, so now I'd like to work with the colour. So what I'm going to do is grab a hue saturation mask, and I'm going to raise it up a fair bit. Let's put it on about 26. And I will at this time mask off on their skin. Now remember that for when you swap and go it over for later on, that you probably need to mask off on that layer later. Okay. I'd like to raise the exposure a little bit, so I'm just going to go to exposure. That's just a touch too much. Maybe about 38 will do it. Yep, there we go. Okay, so the yellows and the greens are bugging me a little bit, so I'm just going to go to selective colour, and let's pull down the greens firstly. And I'll just make them more yellow. There we go. And whilst I'm here, I will grab hue saturation and grab the yellows. Okay. And just drag that up a little bit too. Just again to make sure I get rid of those greens. Okay, one more vignette, I think. So I'll do a gradient. This time I'm going to go with the darker colours. So both of them on black. Actually, I might end that one on a greeny note. Okay. And I'll make that radial and inverse it. Just raise that a little bit. Okay. Now I'll reduce the opacity of that down a touch. Okay. Now I will need to fix the red skin, and I think I'll need to do that. I'll show you how to do it, but I think we'll need to do that individually with each file that we transfer over, but we'll have a look. But first of all, I do want to add a little bit of contrast to the whole image. Okay. And I'm going to erase that contrast off in the middle, because I'm fairly sure in most of the images that I'll be working on, that contrast is in the middle is not where I want it. So I'm going to even go over here a little bit. I'm just trying to bring some of that detail back on the edges there. Okay, so I've erased that off. Okay, so at this stage, a little bit of a lighten. Perfect. And I'll do a little bit of a light from above, just behind them a little bit. So I'll go select all and a gradient, and I need to pick out golden. Okay, and I'll press OK, and I make that radial, and press OK, and I'll just drag that up above a little bit and reduce the opacity down a touch. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with that. What I'm going to do now is group all the layers. Call that sweeties. Okay, so let's go before and after. So that's before and that's after. Okay, so it's just brought more attention to the children at this point. Okay, so now the reason I've done this is to show you how to quickly move this onto other files. So, assuming that you've already exported all your files into a TIFF or JPEG, depending on what you work on. I work in TIFF. Then you can open them up individually in Photoshop. And then I'll show you how to work that over to the other files. Okay, so here we are with two other files from that same shoot with the same area. And this is the one we've already worked on. Now all I did was in Lightroom was I grabbed the one that we'd worked on and I grabbed the other ones and I pressed sync. So they came out the same in Photoshop, out of Lightroom into Photoshop. Okay, so keeping that in mind, we can now grab the group that we made and say duplicate group and simply pick down the document that you already have open and press OK. And here it is here. Now, like I said, we will need to work on the skin tones, but that's a really quick way of getting the same feel really fast. So let's go into the other one and we'll go duplicate group. And here's the other one. Okay, so again, there are areas that we'll need to work on. So let's have a quick look at this one, for example. So obviously the effect has gone onto that little girl's face over here a little bit too much, so we just have to mask that off. And I'll fade that brush down a little bit and start that again. There we go. And we can even fade that down here a little bit as well. Okay, so that's already a lot better. Okay, and have a look at this one. Now again, we can just make a mask out of the whole group and mask back off to their original skin tones, which is actually a really quick way of doing it. So I'm at 41% opacity here. Okay. Alright, so As I said, this is a really quick way of working on files, and make sure that when you do this kind of thing that you're only using mask layers, so that if you actually grab the background layer and duplicate that, then you include that into the group, then you've got problems. It's going to take that background layer over into your other files. So keep that in mind. So you can't really sharpen or blur, for example, so you can do that later on. Alright, so let's see what I do for this one. Last but not least, I think that it just needs another little solid colour. Now this is on the individual file. So I'm actually going to grab a solid colour and make it peachy. Put it at the top. Reduce the opacity of that down. Okay. And I could probably mask that off at the edges. But that's softened their skin tones right out very quickly. There we go. Okay. So I'm fairly happy with that. Let's pop that at the top. Oops. Okay, so we can do a before and after. Alright. Now, I hope that you enjoyed that. Make sure you follow along with the PDF, as I always say, and I'll see you in the next episode.